Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Before I introduce you to our guest, here is a quote just for this episode. The eyes are more exact witnesses than the ears. Heraclitus, the warrior trader. Our guest today is a warrior, friend of the Culture Matters podcast with a passion to serve, relentless, that they and their family have hugely impacted Culture Matters. Me, what we're doing, what we're becoming. And it's an honor to have them back again on the Culture Matters podcast. They're a steward in their piety and in their desire to be a leader and a servant of people. And if you haven't heard them on the Culture Matters podcast, you got to look back at the older episodes, get it together. Current, let's say, co-steward of Hubert Vester Auto Group, Chris Vester, is back again to educate us on a series here on the values of the Hubert Vester Auto Group and what it stands for. Today, we're going to be talking about a passion to serve, and that inspired. Like when I saw this quote, I wanted to ask Chris what he thought about it. The eyes are more exact witnesses than the ears. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for blessing me with the most gracious introduction. I think, like every introduction you give me, I just like, man, that was gracious. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And you've been a massive impact on our family. I told you I had a conversation with Dad. I think it was yesterday. Good. And I asked him, where do you think the family would be without Jay's involvement? I appreciate you more than you know. We do.
Yeah, it's beyond. I think it's beyond both. I mean, this is my feeling of this. It's beyond any of us. Is that's how meaningful it is, truly. And your walk and your family's walk and your faith is really a great example of the eyes are more exact witnesses than the ears. I think in that. So yeah, I'd like if we're going to talk about a passion to serve, which is one of the values of HVAG. What comes to mind as it relates to that quote, if anything?
Oh, it's living. If you're going to use that as, and it is one of our core values, but you know, it's that quote's very much, excuse me, similar to something Suzanne and I have learned through our children, that you're there's many lessons your children catch. They're not taught them. It's caught, not taught. You know, and that the idea of displaying a value like passion to serve, it's going to be one of those that's caught, not taught, through eyes, not because you talk about it all the time. It's not about you talk about how you serve. It's about how others see you serve. Um, and it's when we developed these value systems for our company. We did it with who we thought were clonable employees. And how those clonable employees showed up. That was the exercise we went through. But then you look back at my father's the founder of this company, and how many of those values he's just embodied his whole life.
Wow.
Seeing how he's served everyone around him, but specifically, being entrepreneurial basically his whole life. Like it's like he can tell you stories of buying candy and selling candy as a kid, because then it was about money, because he wanted to buy his own school clothes. But the lessons I learned when we were farming, he started his farming operation in his early 20s. So I'm 3, 4, 5 years old. And like watching how he showed up there, serving those that were working for him. Like he was never asking them to do anything he wasn't willing to do, and in any way that he could show up to serve, that's what he did. So it's yeah, it's something we wrote down on the wall in 2017, but I think it's something that my dad and our family has exhibited our whole life. I I share with you, like, the five of us of my immediate family, developed a system of core values, and serving with our feet and hands is one of those things. Um,
Mm.
is my children and my wife show up really, really well in how they serve, and they have a passion for it. They really have a passion for serving others.
Let's say I'm in someone listening to this that is not uh, within the walls of the dealer group. They're in the automotive space, and they have a, let's say they're in sales, and they have a passion to serve. How can they exemplify that value in that position? What are some ways, some ways to do that?
I'll give you an example of how I had a salesperson explain it to me. I think that's the
Mm.
best way. I was having a conversation with a salesperson. This has been a couple 3 weeks ago. And he's a newer salesperson. He's been with us less than a year. He's never been in sales before, and he's amazing at it because he loves people. But he had a situation where he had a customer come in. They went through the whole process, and he ended up not selling her a car. Like, they didn't consummate a deal out of it. But she came back to see him. I want to say it was like 2 weeks later, because she had actually chose a different brand than what we carry. So it wasn't about she left us and found a better, cheaper car somewhere. She actually chose a different brand than we sell, and she was looking at new vehicles only. And when she came back to him, it was literally just to sit at his desk and tell him what an influence he had been on her with the way he wanted to serve her with information and education, um, to help her solve a problem. If we look at our core values, we also have a core process. That core process is we meet and greet the customer, we identify their problem, we present a solution to the problem, we solve their problem, and then we follow up into perpetuity. Well, that identifying a problem and presenting a solution, like, we didn't solve her problem, but she left with enough information and education to go solve her problem. So he served her in a way that there was no real expectation of there to be a consummation of a deal out of it. And he came to me and he goes, that really brought to light how we are here to serve people, even if it means we don't necessarily end up selling them a car. He goes, because now she's committed to sending me customers. So it's like just the way he showed up for her and serving and educating her in her decision making. Um, but I think that's a perfect example. You know, we have a lot of, youth, like, I don't call them euphemisms, but a lot of things in our business that we've developed processes around. Like, the thing we say sets us apart is that our company does serve with its feet and hands. We believe that an educated customer and an educated employee lead to an amazing transaction. So that's the E in what sets us apart. And then T is time. We know that time is the most valuable thing. So we want to value your time more than anybody else. And he said, when you talk about those things, Chris, he goes, it's about how do we serve, right? And then how do we educate? And, like, I think education is just a way to serve. So
Mm.
if I was in the business, I said, okay, well, how can I serve? I think it's all about the interaction with the customer, knowing that it may not end up in the consummation of a deal, but it may create a relationship that ends up to a lot of consummations of deals. You know, so it's looking beyond just the right now. It's looking deeper into the relationship of who's in front of you, and how can you just be there to serve them.
Where does the passion come from?
Man, that's a great question. For me, it's because it was modeled. So I guess if you extend that beyond just the ownership and the founding family, I guess it would be the same way. If they see you passionate about it, then maybe they catch that passion. I mean, because like the salesperson I just mentioned, his name's Isaiah. Like it almost like it's lit the fire in him to understand, hey, if I display that, in a way, then ultimately it's going to lead to my success when it comes to the business. But it's still just it's like it lit the flame of that. Um, for me personally, the passion comes from having done it and seeing the fruit of it with relationships and customers that have come to us forever, and their family and their grandchildren, their children, their grandchildren, nieces and nephews end up becoming customers of ours because of how we showed up for them. I mean, it's just there's a feeling that I get when I am serving somebody that I don't think there's anything else that can give me that I can think of, whether it's at work or in the community or church or wherever. Like the idea of being there to serve with no expectation of anything in return.
Hmm.
It's a maybe what's it's funny. Maybe the passion is like comes from that reward loop or reward system of how I feel in the moment of serving. Maybe that's what creates the passion. That if you've never been raised or brought up or educated on the fact that we should be servants, like, until you're able to see it in action and actually perform that service, like it's an odd thing to hear. You and I, you may remember this conversation. This goes back a long time. We were um, having a conversation about the difficulties we were having in two of our dealerships that were in a different area than where our home base is. It was in a different town. And you said to me, like, Chris, if you listen to your value systems, they're rooted in faith. They're biblically rooted. You can find biblical references to every one of those things. And you said, what's the church life and faith element in that town look like? And I said to you, I can't think of a large serving church in that town. And I had never done the research. And then you said, well, what about Wilson? And I said, well, off the top of my head, I can name 4 churches that have thousands of members. And you said, that's the difference. Those people around Wilson have been told their whole life it's good to be a servant. And in that other town, it's a foreign concept, because if they don't have a faith base, then they don't understand you're called to be a servant. So I think over the course of time, when you're exposed to it and you go and actually do it, that it creates this positive feedback loop of what it feels like when you serve someone.
Hmm.
It feels good. It feels way better to serve than to be served. It's like gift giving. It feels better to give a gift than to get one. You know?
Hmm.
So I hope that answers the question, because I think the
Well, it
passion.
brings me to mind that movie, The Passion of the Christ.
Oh yeah,
Why is it named that?
yeah, because
I
he's
don't know. No, I is that
well. That
like
week
what
is
is
yeah.
passion?
So
What does passion even
that
mean?
that week is that week of prior going into um that Passover week is called the Passion Week. Um, so it's, to me, passion is ultimate calling, ultimate purpose. Um, so if there's a maybe we should call it a purpose to serve rather than passion to serve. Like we feel like it's our purpose to be here as servants. Because I think if we think about the passion of Christ, that whole that is about the last days, and it's him fulfilling his ultimate purpose. Which is why it's called Passion Week. So maybe it's
Well, I love it then even more.
synonymous with purpose, passion, and purpose. That's we actually, Suzanne and I did a podcast with a couple, and we were talking about the idea of developing your purpose. And she said, what she had discovered is when she examined her own heart, and said, what's on my heart that breaks my heart that I know breaks God's heart, then that's where I find purpose. Um, so purpose, passion, maybe they're interchangeable. Makes sense to me.
Someone that's in, let's say, a role of a salesperson in an automotive context, what are some behaviors or scenarios that you've seen in throughout your career that would example the opposite of a passion to serve?
um, I'll give you a great example of that. So our company, our organization, we don't do what's called staffed events. So there's companies out there that are created in what they do specifically in the automotive space. And they do it in a lot of spaces. They do it in the gym space. They do it in a lot of different verticals, but they'll bring in a quote unquote sales team, marketing team. They drop a huge amount of direct mail into your market that drives opportunities in the door or drives customers in the door. And then the sales team that works for that organization is in charge of greeting that customer, waiting on that customer, and ultimately most all of the whole of the transaction is it's like you relegate it to this outside service. And we don't do it because I've seen the negative results and the negative horrible things that come from those, because those sales, they come in, they're there for 4 or 5 days, and then they leave. So they have no responsibility to the customer. There's no relationship with the customer. They don't have to look the customer in the eye in 3 years or 2 years or 6 months or 30 days to let them know there's been a promise made that can't be fulfilled. Because their whole thing is get in, take as much advantage of this of the market as possible, and get out. And when companies car dealerships do that, then some of the profitability from those transactions is how those people get paid. So they're usually extremely profitable transactions um, for the dealership, but the lasting effect of that is always negative. It's like there's just no relationship consummation. It's just transaction. So the idea of those companies coming in and being 100% transactional, it's just never lined up with us. But when I've seen it through other companies, and I can tell you, there was a time in our company where we would do one or two of those a year. And like once taking over the position I'm in, like I said, never, we're never doing, never. And I used the word never doing those again, because of just everything negative associated with those. Like if you can think about every bad movie in the car space, in the car business, where they talk about, people getting like transactionally beat down, like that's what happens in that situation. And it's just horrible. So we don't do them. So you talk about what can go wrong, the worst. Like it's promises made, um, thing items misrepresented, product misrepresented, promises. Like it's just horrible. It's horrible. And so we just say we're not going to do those. Like I've never met one of those companies that had our value system, so we're not going to use them.
Can someone make a good living as a car salesperson with ethics?
Oh, for sure. Alton Vincent's been with me for this is his 27th year. Um, and he'll make, close to $250,000 this year. And you know what I never hear out of his customers? That he made a promise that he couldn't keep, that he misrepresented product, that he wouldn't pick up the phone when they called. Like I've never, ever heard a customer that had a situation with Alton where he didn't show up on behalf of the customer. Um, Johnny Kent's been with us a long time, and represents himself much the way Alton does. It's about, he knows he's representing the values of the company in every transaction. And like, we never get complaints about those people, and they make really good livings. I mean, to give you I mean, maybe $250,000 a year doesn't sound like a lot to somebody on the call, but the average household income in the town we're in is under $50,000.
Wow.
So in this area, that's an extremely good living. But he works hard and he takes care of his customers extremely well. So it's not about each transaction making a bunch of money. It's about, hey, I'm going to make a lot of transactions. I'm going to make a lot of friends. I'm going to make a lot of relationships. And because I'm providing good service, I'll get paid.
Mm.
So, yeah, you can definitely make a great living doing this. I mean, as a salesperson, there's situations, there's months that he's probably made more than some of the management staff.
Mm.
But he has a absolute passion, not only to serve the customer, but to serve the company. You know, he
What
shows up.
what yeah, what work ethic exemplifies a passion to serve?
Um, well, it's interesting you say that, Jay, because I think a lot of people would say that the work ethic of first in, last out, you know, first guy to show up, last guy to leave. But in our organization, like, we ask we ask our employees not to put us first. We ask them to put us third. And we talk about our faith very openly in our organization. And it's, put God first, show up to make him proud. And that'll take care of your family, which should be second. And then we're third. And if you show up with those two priorities, first and second, then hey, we're going to be okay. And I think Alton definitely does that, but that showing up, wanting to make his maker proud. I mean, that work ethic's different. So there are days that he's first in, last out, but it's never at the expense of his family. So he exemplifies what we say to every new employee when we bring them in and introduce them to the company is, we're not asking to be first, we're asking to be third. But a lot of times when you put those parties in order, like, we end up moving to way up the list because of how they want to show up,
Mm.
and who they're honoring by how they show up. And I say that holds true for most every high performer in our organization has that same attitude. It's not about, I'm just going to grind. It's about, hey, who am I showing up to bring glory to? And then it just trickles down from there.
Mm.
I know there's a lot of people that don't believe in trickle down economics, but trickle down priorities definitely work as the priorities are in the right order.
Mm. If you were to uh, articulate the inversion of passion to serve, or the opposite of it, how would you describe, if the anti-value?
Um, I would say that in any given position in our organization, if they were the antithesis of that,
Yeah.
then it would be every opportunity that's in front of them at the time is only worth what they can get out of the opportunity. It's just 100% transactional with what's in it for them first. Not what's in it for the customer, what's in it for me. With them, isn't that what it says? What's in it for me? With them.
Mm.
That's definitely the opposite of having a passion. What's in it for me? It's interesting. Suzanne and I were having a conversation with a couple recently, and what they're struggling with. I said, I've never showed up I can honestly say, and I've never shown up in the way that they're struggling, thinking about what's in it for me first. And Suzanne doesn't show up in a what's in it for me first in that particular area. So that's not a struggle for us because we both show up in that space. And how can I serve my spouse? Um, so I think there's a lot of lesson in life in that is if you approach everything in how can I serve the one in front of me? Um, then it's just it, it changes the way relationships work as a whole.
If you're listening to this episode of the Culture Matters podcast, re-listen to this episode of the Culture Matters podcast. Think about how you can bring a passion to serve to your life, your business. Follow Chris, and please leave us a review. Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time.